Ryan called it an opportunity. He said it with that same confident smile that used to make me believe he could fix anything. It's just a short-term investment, Nora. A guaranteed return. We could double our savings in a year. He was talking fast, moving around the kitchen, like a man rehearsing for a pitch. The way he emphasized we felt rehearsed too, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. I was at the counter with my laptop open, reviewing a client portfolio for work. I didn't even look up when I said, "How much are we talking about?" He smiled wider. 150,000. That number hit like cold water. I looked up. "You mean our savings?" He shook his head, like I'd missed the point. "We'd sell the house. We can rent for a bit, invest that money, and buy a bigger one later. Think long-term, babe. It's smart." I stared at him, trying to find the part where this made sense. "You want to sell our home, the house I paid for, to invest in something you can't even name?" Ryan laughed, but it wasn't his normal laugh. It was sharper, louder, almost defensive. "You don't trust me anymore? After everything I've done for this family?" There it was. The guilt trip. Classic Ryan. He walked over, placed his hand on my shoulder, and lowered his voice like we were in some movie scene about big dreams. "You've always been the cautious one, Nora. That's what I love about you, but sometimes you gotta take a leap." I closed my laptop. "Then leap with your own money." His smile cracked. For a second, I saw something in his eyes, not disappointment, not frustration, but something colder. Calculation. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying I worked my ass off for this house. I'm not selling it because you've got a new hobby." Ryan's jaw tightened. He exhaled through his nose, the kind of slow breath men take when they're trying not to explode. "You're unbelievable," he said finally. "You're standing in the way of something that could change our lives." "Maybe," I said. "But whose life are we changing exactly?" He didn't answer. He just grabbed his keys and left. The sound of his car door slamming echoed through the house, and I felt that old familiar ache in my stomach, the one I used to get when I'd catch him lying about small things. But this wasn't small. This was everything. That night, he didn't come home for dinner. Around 11 p.m., I texted, "Are you okay?" He didn't reply. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I saw was a printed folder on the kitchen table with a sticky note. "Read it with an open mind." And F. Inside were loan documents and a pre-approval letter, all in both our names. My name had been forged, the signature shaky but close enough that someone might not notice. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I called him immediately. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. "If you ever fake my signature again, I will make sure your next investment is in a divorce lawyer." I didn't cry. Not yet. Not because I was strong, because I was in shock. It was like realizing your partner had quietly been planning your downfall behind your back. By noon, he walked in like nothing had happened. "You saw the papers?" "Yes. And I also saw my forged signature." He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Nora, don't make it sound criminal. I was just trying to move things forward. You always slow everything down." That's when I finally snapped. "You don't get to gamble with my name. Or my house." He smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "You really think you can keep everything to yourself? You wouldn't even have this place if it weren't for me." That was it. The one sentence that burned everything down. Because it wasn't true. When we bought the house, I paid the down payment. I made every mortgage payment. I even handled his tax debt after he forgot to file 2 years in a row. He didn't build this home. I did. I walked right up to him, calm but furious. "You didn't earn this roof, Ryan. You just live under it." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Just silence, a tight, hateful silence that said more than words could. He picked up the folder and said, "Fine. If you won't sell the house, maybe I'll find someone who appreciates opportunity." That line lingered long after he slammed the door. Find someone who appreciates opportunity. I didn't know it yet, but he already had. And while I sat there in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by papers that felt like evidence, I realized something simple and terrifying. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. He didn't just want the house. He wanted me to give it up. If you've ever seen someone you love twist the truth until you start doubting your own sanity, you know that silence isn't peace, it's pressure building. And that pressure? It was just getting started. Before we keep going, tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone so much that you didn't see the cracks forming until it was too late? And if you haven't yet, make sure you hit subscribe, because this story gets worse before it gets better. The next morning, the house felt heavier, like it knew something I didn't. Ryan had left early for work, at least. That's what the note on the counter said. Big meeting today. Don't wait up. Oh. I stood there staring at his handwriting, wondering when it had started to feel like a lie. Maybe it was the way the loops in his letters had changed tighter, rushed, impatient. Or maybe I was just finally paying attention. I opened my laptop to distract myself with work, but my mind wouldn't stay still. Every click of the keyboard felt forced. The more I tried not to think about that investment, the louder it echoed in my head. By noon, I gave in and logged into our joint bank account. The moment the page loaded, my stomach dropped. 2 withdrawals, $2,500 each, labeled as consulting fees. I didn't remember authorizing anything like that. I clicked deeper. The account history showed a name I hadn't seen before, S. Grant Holdings. It sounded corporate, harmless even, but something about it made my skin crawl. I searched it online, nothing. No website, no records. Just a name that didn't exist. That night, I decided to test him. I asked about his meeting. He said it went great. His tone was light, rehearsed, like an actor who said the same line too many times. "What's S. Grant Holdings?" I asked, pretending to be casual. He froze mid-bite. Just for a second, but it was enough. Then he laughed too loud. "Oh, that? Just a supplier account. Don't overthink it." I nodded and smiled, but my chest burned. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he said he'd quit smoking years ago, and I later found a lighter in his glove compartment. When he went to bed, I checked his laptop. He'd changed the password. By midnight, I was sitting at the kitchen table in my robe, laptop open, running through every account we shared. The deeper I looked, the more cracks appeared. Charges from restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel stays under his business card. All small enough to hide, but not from someone who tracks every cent like I do. My hands shook as I printed the statements. Paper doesn't lie. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock felt amplified. I kept replaying the last few weeks in my head. The late-night calls, the new cologne, the sudden business trips. The next morning, I called the bank pretending to be verifying a transaction. I asked if S. Grant Holdings was tied to any known business accounts. The woman on the phone paused. "That's not a company. It's a personal account under the name Sophie Grant." For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what I'd heard. I just sat there, silent, with the phone pressed against my ear. When I hung up, my throat felt tight. Sophie Grant, his assistant, the woman he'd mentioned in passing months ago. She's new, fresh out of grad school, super sharp. I wanted to throw something, but instead, I just stood there, staring at the family photo on the mantel, the one from 3 Christmases ago. Ryan had his arm around me, smiling like a man who'd never lie. At work, I tried to act normal. My coworker Emily asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but my eyes must have told the truth, because she said, "You look like you just found out Santa's not real." That made me laugh, which almost made me cry. That night, Ryan came home late again, smelling faintly of expensive perfume. Not mine. He kissed my forehead and went straight to shower. I sat in the living room, holding the printed statements in my lap, feeling like I was holding a loaded weapon. Every line on those pages was a betrayal in black and white. When he came out of the bathroom, I asked, "Do you love me?" He looked startled. "What kind of question is that? Just answer it." He hesitated. "Of course I do." All 11. "Then why are you sending money to Sophie Grant?" The color drained from his face. He stammered. "You've been checking my accounts? That's invasive, Nora. That's crossing a line." I almost laughed. "Crossing a line? You forged my name on a loan application, Ryan." He threw his hands up. "I told you that was a misunderstanding. I was fixing it." I stood up, shaking, Not from fear, from fury. Then explain the hotel bills, the dinners, the wire transfers. Explain all of it. He didn't. He just stared at me, jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening like he was holding back something ugly. Finally, he said, "You always have to control everything. You track every dollar, every move, every damn thing I do." "That's what people do when they've been lied to," I said quietly. He laughed bitterly. "You're paranoid." "No," I said, holding up the papers. "I'm informed." The silence that followed was thick. He grabbed his keys and muttered, "You make it impossible to love you." Then the door slammed again. This time, I didn't chase after him. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I sat down, breathing hard, surrounded by proof, not just of infidelity, but of how much I'd ignored to keep the peace. When you love someone long enough, you start mistaking fear for compromise. You think keeping quiet is protecting your marriage. But silence doesn't save anything, it just delays the explosion. And mine was coming faster than I knew. The sound of tires screeching outside jolted me out of half sleep. My phone showed 1:14 a.m. Ryan stumbled in, the door slamming hard enough to rattle a picture frame. He reeked of whiskey, and something floral that definitely wasn't mine. He tossed his keys on the counter and muttered, "You still up?" "I was worried," I said quietly. "Worried?" He laughed dryly. "You're always worried. About money, about control, about me. Maybe that's why we're here." His eyes were bloodshot, the kind that belong to someone who's already chosen the argument before walking in. "I'm not fighting you, Ryan," I said, keeping my tone even. "Just go to bed." But he wanted a fight. "You think you're better than me because you keep receipts and spreadsheets? You think owning this house makes you queen of everything?" I didn't answer. Silence, I'd learned, was gasoline to his pride. He slammed the fridge shut. "Say something." And I did. "I want you out." The words hung there. For a second, even he looked stunned. Then his face twisted anger, disbelief, maybe shame. "You don't mean that." "I do." He grabbed the back of a chair, knuckles whitening. "You'd throw away everything we built?" I stepped closer. "We didn't build this, Ryan." "I did. You just showed up for the photos." Something broke then. He kicked the chair aside, stormed down the hallway, and came back holding his old baseball bat, the one from his college days. The one he said he kept, for sentimental reasons. The air went thin. My body reacted before my mind did. I backed up until my hip hit the counter. He didn't swing it, not yet. He just pointed it toward the wall, then brought it down hard on the edge of the dining table. The crack was so loud it felt like lightning in my ears. "You don't tell me to leave my own house," he shouted. I screamed back, "It's not your house!" And then the bat met the floor again, this time splintering the leg of the table. I ran to the door, hand trembling on the knob, but stopped. Leaving would have meant surrendering everything in that moment. So I stood my ground. "If you touch me, I swear to God." He cut me off, swinging once more, this time into the wall. Plaster burst into dust. "I'm not touching you. I'm proving a point." "And of 4. "What point?" I yelled. "That you destroy everything you can't control?" That stopped him. Just for a second. He looked at me, breathing hard, the bat lowered but still in his grip. Then, without another word, he stormed out the front door. The engine started. The car peeled off into the night. The silence afterward wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes when the storm's eye passes, quiet, deceptive, temporary. I sank to the floor. The table was split. The drywall was shattered. And for the first time, I cried not the quiet, graceful tears you see in movies. Ugly, choking sobs that felt like years of pretending, finally collapsing all at once. I don't know how long I sat there, but when the clock hit 3 a.m., I wiped my face, stood up, and grabbed my phone. I called Daniel Cross, an old friend, now a financial attorney. He picked up on the second ring. "Nora, what's wrong?" "I need help," I said. My voice cracked. "I think my husband's been forging signatures, and I think he's dangerous." Daniel didn't waste time with comfort. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes. He's gone." "Lock your doors. I'll meet you tomorrow morning. Don't confront him again until we talk." I locked every door, every window. Then I went to bed with the bat lying across my lap, still shaking from the sound of it breaking the table. The next morning, sunlight came through the blinds like nothing had happened. I almost laughed at how normal everything looked except for the mess. Splinters of wood on the floor, a gash in the drywall. I made coffee, hands still trembling, and stared at the cup, as if it could explain how the man I once loved had turned into someone I didn't recognize. At 10 a.m., Daniel showed up with a briefcase and the kind of calm voice you only get from years of dealing with chaos. We sat at the same table Ryan had smashed the night before. "Start from the beginning," he said. I told him everything: the forged loan, the hidden account, Sophie Grant, the violence. He took notes in silence, then looked up. "You need to protect yourself financially first. We'll move your assets into a trust, under your legal name only. It's clean, it's quick, and he can't touch it." "And the marriage?" I asked. Daniel paused. "That depends. Do you want to save it or survive it?" That question landed harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. "Survive it," I said finally. He nodded once. "Then we start today." We spent hours going through paperwork, bank transfers, insurance policies, title deeds. Every line felt like a piece of armor being put on. By late afternoon, I was exhausted but steady. The fear was still there, but now it had shape and strategy. When Daniel left, I stood at the door watching him drive off. Across the street, the Hendersons' kids were playing baseball in their yard. The sound of the bat cracking against the ball made me flinch. That night, I packed a small bag just in case. And when Ryan's car finally pulled into the driveway at midnight, I didn't move. I just listened. Keys jingling, footsteps, the pause outside our bedroom door. Then, finally, silence. The kind that says, "This isn't over. It's only paused long enough for both of us to reload." The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful, the kind that buzzes in your ears because your body's still waiting for something bad to happen. Ryan was gone again. The front door was cracked open, cold air leaking in. The kitchen looked like a war zone. A chair split in two, a dent in the wall, shards of glass glittering under the morning light. My hands were trembling before I even realized I was moving. I grabbed a trash bag and started cleaning. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the part of me that still believed fixing the mess might somehow fix the marriage. By the time I'd swept up the last piece of broken glass, my reflection in the microwave door looked like someone I didn't recognize. Pale, hollow-eyed, still wearing the same t-shirt from last night. When the knock came, I jumped. It was Daniel. He didn't say anything at first, just looked around, taking in the wreckage. "He did this?" I nodded. He sighed, set down his briefcase, and rolled up his sleeves. "Then we're moving fast." We spent hours sorting through papers. Daniel helped me transfer ownership of the house into a private trust one Ryan couldn't touch without my written consent. We froze the joint account, rerouted all my direct deposits, and changed the passwords on every online banking platform. Every click, every document signed, felt like reclaiming oxygen. "From now on," Daniel said, "you document everything. Every text, every call, every threat. Keep a file. If he comes back, don't argue. Call the police." I nodded, though the word police felt foreign in my mouth. When Daniel left, he said, "Nora, I know you. You don't want revenge. You want peace. But sometimes, peace requires paperwork." I almost smiled at that. By evening, I heard Ryan's car pull into the driveway. I felt my chest tighten, like my ribs were a cage. He came in smelling of beer and cheap cologne, tossed his jacket over a chair, and looked around. "You cleaned up?" he said, as if he'd come home to a maid service. "Someone had to," I replied. He smirked, poured himself whiskey, and leaned on the counter. "You talked to your lawyer friend, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. "How do you—" "Saw his car," he interrupted. "You think I'm stupid?" "No," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I think you're reckless." "And did." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Reckless? You think moving money behind my back makes you clever? You really think I won't find a way?" I met his stare. "Try." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he slammed his glass down, shards of ice flying across the counter. You're making me the bad guy, Nora. You're turning me into something I'm not. You did that yourself, I said quietly. He didn't respond. He just walked to the living room and turned on the TV, the volume so loud it made the windows hum. I went to my room and locked the door. Through the thin walls, I could hear him muttering to himself angry, incoherent words blending with the hum of the television. The next morning, he was gone again. This time, he'd taken the bat with him. I didn't bother calling. Instead, I drove to my office at Summit Harbor Bank like it was any other day, pretending to be someone whose life wasn't collapsing behind the scenes. At lunch, my coworker Emily leaned over. Rough night? I forced a laugh. You could say that. But even as I said it, I knew things had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. When I got home, the door was still locked. No sign of Ryan. I made tea and sat by the window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. It was strange how normal the world looked while mine was quietly imploding. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You'll regret making me look weak. No name. No context. But I knew it was him. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Daniel, and saved it in the folder labeled Evidence. For the first time, I didn't cry. Not because I was calm, because something inside me had shifted. Fear had turned into focus. I realized then that I'd stopped waiting for Ryan to love me again. I was waiting for him to make his final mistake. I spent the next few days in quiet preparation, updating passwords, redirecting mail, backing up files. Every small act felt like a stitch closing a wound. Friday evening, I came home to find the driveway empty, but a letter taped to the door, his handwriting. You can't erase me from this house, Nora. You'll see. I read it once, tore it in half, and threw it in the trash. Then I double-checked every lock in the house. That night, I slept with the lamp on. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the faint sound of footsteps outside. Not a dream, not this time. The creak of the porch boards was real, slow, deliberate. Then, silence. A second later, the motion sensor light clicked on, flooding the front yard in pale yellow. Through the window, I saw him standing there, still as a statue, the baseball bat glinting in his hand. And for the first time, I didn't freeze. I reached for my phone and started recording. Because fear only controls you until you decide to document it. The police lights outside my house faded into the night after taking my statement. They'd found nothing. No forced entry, no damage, just a man standing in his own front yard holding a bat. Technically, he hadn't broken any laws. Yet, I spent the rest of that night sitting in the living room with every light on, clutching a mug that had gone cold hours ago. Fear had a strange taste, bitter and metallic, like something you couldn't swallow or spit out. The next morning, Daniel called. You need to stop reacting and start gathering, he said. If you want to protect yourself, we document everything. I already started, I replied. But I need more than texts and threats. I need to know where the money went. He exhaled. Then we follow the trail. For the next week, that's exactly what I did. I went through every transaction, every transfer, every email. My eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, but patterns started forming. Money moved from our joint account to a private one under his name, then out again to the same recurring recipient, S. Grant. Sophie Grant. The same name that had been sitting in my head like a splinter for weeks. I printed out every statement and laid them on the dining table like a crime board. Thousands of dollars funneled through fake consulting invoices, all signed with Ryan's neat, controlled handwriting. By Thursday, I was done guessing. I called Sophie's office line at Evermark Logistics. Hi, this is Nora Hale, I said. I'm calling about the expense reimbursements from the Chicago trip. There was a pause on the other end, then a hesitant voice. I'm not sure what you mean. Really? I said, leaning back in my chair. Because you were listed as the travel companion on every hotel invoice from that week. Silence. Then, a shaky whisper. Mrs. Hale, I think you should talk to your husband. And she hung up. That told me everything I needed to know. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, feeling that same cold detachment I used to see in Ryan's eyes whenever he lied. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was data. That night, when Ryan came home, he looked exhausted and angry, like someone living two lives and failing at both. Rough day? I asked without looking up from my laptop. Don't start, he muttered, loosening his tie. I'm not in the mood. Too bad, I said, because I found your mood on the Marriott statement, along with hers. He froze. I turned the screen toward him, where the line item read, Room service, 2 guests. His jaw tightened. You've been spying on me? I've been married to you, I said flatly. There's a difference. He grabbed the back of a chair, the same way he had before. You don't understand how business works. Sometimes we... Stop lying, I cut in. You're not bad at business, Ryan. You're bad at being honest. He opened his mouth like he was going to fight back, but then he just walked away, muttering something I couldn't hear. The next morning, I found a new email in our shared inbox. A draft, unsent, addressed to Sophie G. It said, She's catching on. I'll handle it. That was the moment I stopped seeing Ryan as my husband and started seeing him as a problem to solve. I forwarded the email to my private account and called Daniel again. We can't just prepare for divorce, I said. We need leverage. Daniel didn't even hesitate. Then you'll need proof of misappropriation. If he used joint funds for an affair, it's technically financial misconduct, and for non. Which means, it means he's about to pay for more than hotel rooms. For the next few days, Daniel helped me file for a forensic audit of our finances. Quietly, legally, by the book. Meanwhile, Ryan was unraveling. He'd started drinking more, yelling about how everyone at work was turning on him. He blamed his boss, his coworkers, me, anyone but himself. One night, he stumbled into the kitchen at midnight and slurred, You're ruining my life, Nora. I didn't even look up. No, Ryan. I'm just writing the truth down before you erase it. He laughed bitterly. You think your lawyer friend's gonna save you? You think the world cares about your little revenge fantasy? I don't want revenge, I said quietly. I want receipts. The next morning, he didn't come home. I didn't call. By afternoon, an anonymous envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, no note. Inside were photographs. Ryan and Sophie, arm in arm, leaving a hotel in downtown Portland. Date stamped. Clear as daylight. I called Daniel immediately. Someone just mailed me proof. Keep it safe, he said, and don't tell anyone you have it. Whoever sent that knows what's coming. That night, I sat at the kitchen table under the same flickering light bulb Ryan had promised to fix months ago. I spread the photos out beside the bank statements and his fake invoices. Each one fit together like a puzzle he'd accidentally built for me. I should have felt angry, but what I felt instead was clarity. People always say the hardest part of betrayal is finding out the truth. But that's not true. The hardest part is pretending you didn't already know. And the thing about pretending? It only works until you decide to stop. So I did. I took one of the photos, slipped it into a manila folder labeled Audit Evidence, Private, and placed it inside the trust safe Daniel had set up for me. Then I turned off the lights and looked around the quiet house, my house, and realized it finally felt like mine again. Even if I had to burn what was left of my marriage to keep it that way. The next morning, the sky was gray and still. A kind of silence hung over the house that didn't feel empty, it felt clean. I poured myself coffee and stared at the stack of evidence on the kitchen table, bank transfers, photos, and that smug little email draft Ryan never sent. It wasn't enough to end the marriage I needed it to end well. Daniel called, just as I finished my first cup. I've got the audit firm lined up. They'll trace every cent in and out of your accounts over the last 3 years. Quietly. Will he find out? I asked. Not unless he's suddenly learned how to read a subpoena, Daniel said dryly. That made me smile for the first time in weeks. After we hung up, I spent the morning gathering everything that could strengthen the case. Receipts. Invoices. Text screenshots. Every I'll handle it message that proved he'd been hiding more than just an affair. Around noon, I drove to the notary's office to finalize the trust transfer. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, glanced over the paperwork and said, You're moving this property into your name only? Yes, I said, signing the last page. It's about time. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, like I'd just unplugged something toxic. That afternoon, I called my insurance company and removed Ryan as a dependent. It was such a small click on a screen, but it felt like a declaration of independence. Later that evening, I made dinner for myself: pasta, a glass of wine, and sat at the same table he'd once shattered with a bat. The surface was still rough, where the wood had splintered, but it felt solid under my hands. That's when the front door opened. Ryan walked in, still wearing his work clothes. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day, the kind that comes from running out of lies. He dropped his bag on the floor. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "About what? The woman or the money?" He rubbed his face. "Jesus, Nora, you make it sound so dramatic. It's not like that." I leaned back. "No? Then explain it to me like it's not." He hesitated, searching for a version of the truth that wouldn't make him the villain. "Things got complicated. Sophie. She helped me through a rough patch, that's all." I laughed, low and sharp. "You mean the rough patch where you used my credit line to pay for her hotel room?" His head snapped up. "You don't have to humiliate me." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what you did when you signed my name without consent." He took a step closer. "You think you're so clever with your lawyer friend, but you don't understand how this looks. If you go public, it's not just me who gets ruined." "Oh, I'm counting on that," I said. He stared at me, silent for a moment. Then his jaw flexed. "You think you've won something here? You think hiding money and filing paperwork makes you powerful?" "No," I said, finishing my wine. "It makes me free." He exhaled sharply, snatched his bag, and walked out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. After he left, I texted Daniel. "He knows I'm not playing anymore." Daniel replied almost instantly. "Good. Fear makes stupid men predictable." Over the next week, I watched Ryan start to unravel. His calls grew erratic, his tone desperate. He'd swing from apology to anger, like he couldn't decide which mask fit better. At work, his performance tanked. I knew because one of the accountants from Evermark, a woman I'd met years ago at a company barbecue, quietly told me, "They're looking into him. There's talk of irregular expense reports." That was my cue. I logged into a private email account, attached copies of the bank statements and hotel invoices, and sent them anonymously to Evermark's internal compliance office with the subject line, "Potential conflict of interest and financial misconduct." No message, no name, just the truth. When I hit send, I felt a strange kind of calm. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just peace. For the next few days, I acted like nothing happened. Went to work, watered my plants. Slept through the night for the first time in months. Then, on Thursday, it started. Ryan came home earlier than usual, pacing in the driveway on his phone. I heard fragments through the open window. Investigation, false accusations. I didn't do anything wrong. He looked up and saw me watching from inside. For a moment, we just stared at each other through the glass. He mouthed, "Did you do this?" I didn't answer. I just closed the curtains. That night, he sent a text. "You think this ends with you winning?" I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Daniel instead. By the weekend, rumors were spreading that Evermark Logistics had initiated a full audit. Someone from HR had seen Ryan escorted out of the building by security for questioning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't even tell anyone. Revenge, I was learning, wasn't about noise, it was about precision. Sunday morning, I made coffee and sat on the porch watching the rain. The city felt quieter somehow, like it was finally aligning with the stillness I'd been chasing for months. Ryan hadn't called in 3 days. I assumed he was busy trying to plug the holes he'd drilled in his own life. When the mail came, there was an envelope with the Evermark logo, addressed to Mrs. Nora Hale. Inside was a printed letter from their legal department confirming they'd received documentation regarding potential fraudulent activities tied to Mr. Ryan Hale. They were proceeding with a formal review. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in the folder labeled Evidence Phase 2. Then I poured another cup of coffee and said out loud, mostly to myself, "Guess the investment finally paid off." The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was the sound of my own life returning. The quiet didn't last. It never does when someone like Ryan starts to lose control. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard his truck pull into the driveway. Not the smooth hum of a tired man coming home, the hard, jerky sound of someone pressing the gas too long, too loud. I stayed at the kitchen counter, hands resting flat, pretending not to notice. The door slammed open. He didn't say hello. "You think you're clever?" he barked. I didn't even look up. "Hi, Ryan." "Don't hi Ryan me," he snapped. "You sent that damn report to Evermark, didn't you?" I tilted my head slightly. "Which report?" He slammed his palm on the counter, making my coffee mug jump. "Don't play dumb with me. They called me in. Compliance. HR. Everyone. You think they just magically found those files?" I finally turned to him. "So they were right." His face twisted. "You think this is funny? You're ruining my career over a few dinners and a woman who doesn't matter." That last part made me laugh, a sharp, humorless sound. "She mattered enough to risk your marriage and your job." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the mix of sweat and bourbon. "You don't understand what you've started. You think this ends with you walking away clean? They're going to dig into everything, and guess whose name is still on the company's credit line?" I felt the chill in his words, but I didn't flinch. "Mine's clean, yours isn't." He stared at me, jaw tight, then looked around the house, the furniture, the walls, the same place he once called ours. Now it was mine, legally and symbolically. That realization must have burned because his voice dropped low. "You think this house makes you powerful?" he said. "You think paperwork means anything? I built this life, Nora. I kept us afloat. You just handled the receipts." "You're right," I said quietly. "And those receipts are exactly what's drowning you now." For a moment, I thought he might hit something again. His hands curled into fists, his breath short and fast. Then, just as suddenly, he laughed. A long, bitter laugh that didn't sound human. "You really think you've won," he said, shaking his head. "You don't even know what they're saying about you, that you're vindictive, that you set me up." "Good," I said. "Let them talk. The truth doesn't need a PR team." He blinked, caught off guard. For once, I wasn't afraid of him. Not his voice, not his size, not his anger. He walked toward the door, muttering, "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But you'll regret it first." He stopped, hand on the doorknob, looked back at me, and said, "You used to be soft." "And you used to be someone worth forgiving," I replied. When the door shut behind him, I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 2 hours later, my neighbor, Linda, texted me. "Everything okay?" He was out there yelling at his phone for a while. "I'm fine," I wrote back. "Thank you for checking." I wasn't fine, not really. But I was done being afraid. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. No calls, no texts, not even a message from Evermark. Then, Friday afternoon, I got an email from Daniel. Subject: Update on the audit. Body: They've suspended him. Investigation ongoing. Don't react. Stay invisible. Invisible. That word settled into my bones like calm water. But invisibility has its cost. The silence became strange again, not peaceful, but tense, like standing in a room full of smoke and pretending it's air. That night, I heard something outside. A car engine idling. I peeked through the blinds. Ryan's truck, parked across the street. Lights off. Engine still running. I stood there for nearly 5 minutes, watching the faint glow of a cigarette ember flicker inside the cab. Then the truck drove off, tires crunching the gravel slowly. I didn't call the police. Not yet. But I took Daniel's advice. I installed cameras around the house the next morning. Front porch, back door, driveway. Quiet protection, silent witnesses. On Sunday afternoon, Linda dropped by with a plate of cookies. She's 60, kind, the type who notices everything without prying. "Saw him drive by again," she said softly. "You okay?" I smiled. "I will be." When she left, I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Then a text. "You took everything from me." I saved it, forwarded it to Daniel, then blocked the number. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, I thought about all the times I'd tried to save Ryan from himself. From his spending, his temper, his lies. I used to think love meant patience. That if I stayed long enough, he'd find his way back to the man I married. But people don't return from the kind of darkness they build themselves. They just get better at navigating it. And that's what he was doing now, circling, angry, desperate, waiting for me to blink. But I wasn't blinking anymore. I spent the next morning at the courthouse, filing a restraining order. The clerk slid the paperwork across the counter. "You'll need to list specific incidents," she said. I paused, then wrote them all down. The forged loan application, the physical damage with the baseball bat, the threats, verbal and by text, the surveillance parking outside, following. When I handed it back, she nodded and said, "You're doing the right thing, Oak." Walking out of that courthouse, I realized it wasn't revenge I'd been building. It was a defense system. Layer by layer, quiet, legal, airtight. By the time I got home, I felt steady again. The porch camera light blinked once as I walked past. My reflection looked calm, composed, a woman finally back in control of her own frame. Inside, I poured myself tea and opened my laptop. There was another email from Daniel, short and to the point. "The board is pressing charges. Financial misconduct and internal fraud. It's over." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen. The rain outside had stopped, but the air still smelled like thunder. Ryan's empire, his job, his ego, his illusion of control had finally cracked. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the victim of his choices. I felt like the author of my own ending. It happened 2 nights after the restraining order was approved. I hadn't even received the paper copy yet. I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when I heard a car pull into the driveway, too fast, too close. The headlights cut across the window like floodlights, and my body went rigid. I didn't have to look to know it was him. Ryan always had a way of arriving, like bad weather, loud, sudden, impossible to ignore. The engine turned off. A door slammed. Then silence. I dried my hands, picked up my phone, and hit record. The knock wasn't a knock. It was a pound, the kind that shakes the door in its frame. "Nora!" he shouted. "Open up, we need to talk." I didn't move. He hit the door again. "You can't hide behind lawyers and paperwork forever. You ruined my life." The security camera light blinked red outside. Every word was being captured. When he realized I wasn't coming, he switched tactics. "You think you're safe in there? You think they'll believe you after what you've done?" His voice cracked, the anger bleeding into something that almost sounded like fear. Then I heard the sound that made my stomach twist. The metallic clang of his old baseball bat hitting the porch railing. I dialed 911. "This is Nora Hale," I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. "My husband is violating a restraining order and threatening property damage. He's armed with a bat." The operator's tone changed instantly. "Ma'am, stay inside. Officers are on the way. Do not engage." Outside, the bat hit the door, this time once, then twice, harder each time. "You think you can erase me?" Ryan yelled. "You think this house is yours? You're nothing without me." Each word landed like a blow. Then came the sound of shattering glass, the window by the front porch. He'd swung at it. I ran to the hallway, phone still in hand, voice low. "He's breaking the window." "Oh, stay back," the operator said. "Help is minutes away, but a lot can happen in minutes." Through the crack of the broken window, his voice came again, lower, almost pleading. "Nora, come on. You don't have to do this. Just let me in." I didn't answer. He rattled the doorknob. The lock held. Then, headlights appeared in the street, blue and red flashing through the trees. The siren blipped once, short and sharp. Ryan froze. I could see his shadow on the frosted glass, the bat still in his hand. 2 police officers stepped out of their cruiser, flashlights raised. One called out, "Sir, drop the weapon." Ryan turned toward them, arms tense, like he was deciding whether to listen or double down. For a moment, I thought he might do something stupid. But then he dropped the bat, letting it roll across the porch with a dull thud. "Hands up," the officer ordered. Ryan lifted them, slow, shaky. When they cuffed him, he didn't fight. He just kept looking at the house, at me, behind the curtain with that same mix of rage and disbelief. The officer knocked on my door next. "Ma'am, you okay to talk?" I opened it just enough to see his badge. "Yes, I'm fine." He nodded toward the shattered glass. "He's under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and violation of a protective order. Do you want to press additional charges?" He hesitated. Then I looked at the broken window, the dented doorframe, the bat on the porch. "Yes," I said. "Every single one that applies." The officer gave me a look that said he'd seen women like me before, the kind who finally decided fear wasn't love. After they drove off, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. This time, it was the sound of something ending for real. I swept up the glass in slow motions, each piece glittering under the light like tiny fragments of an old life. When I finished, I sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and exhaled until my chest stopped trembling. Around midnight, Daniel called. He must have already heard. "You did everything right," he said. "The footage from your cameras seals it. He won't be able to spin this." "I'm not even angry," I said softly. "I just feel empty." "That's normal," Daniel replied. "Peace feels like emptiness when you've lived in chaos too long." After we hung up, I walked to the porch and picked up the bat. The handle was cold, still slick from the rain that had started to fall. I carried it inside and leaned it against the wall, a reminder, not a threat. The next morning, I got a call from Evermark's HR director. Her voice was polite but distant. "Mrs. Hale, we wanted to inform you that Ryan Hale's employment has been terminated effective immediately following his arrest and internal findings. We appreciate your cooperation during the investigation." "Thank you," I said, my voice even. When I hung up, I stared out the window at the driveway, the empty space where his truck used to be. For the first time, I realized he wasn't coming back. Not to argue, not to threaten, not to apologize. The house, for all its cracks and dents and broken pieces, was mine again. Not a battlefield, not a cage, just a place that could finally breathe. I spent the rest of the day patching the broken window with cardboard and tape until the contractor could come. It wasn't perfect, but it was quiet and it was safe. By evening, the rain stopped. I brewed tea, sat on the couch, and watched the light fade through the patchwork window. It felt strange, that stillness, like I'd been underwater for years, and was finally remembering how to breathe. The funny thing about survival is that it doesn't always look strong. Sometimes it just looks like a woman sitting in her living room, holding a warm mug, while the world outside finally stops knocking. The day after Ryan's arrest, the city felt different, quieter, lighter, almost like the world had decided to exhale with me. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the rain slide down the patched glass. For the first time in months, there wasn't a knot in my chest, just calm. Then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Evermark's audit results came in," he said. "It's bad for him, Nora. Real bad." I took a slow sip of coffee. "How bad?" "They've confirmed falsified expense reports, unauthorized transfers, and a pattern of financial misconduct spanning at least 2 years. They've referred the case to law enforcement." I closed my eyes. "So this isn't just corporate?" "No," Daniel said. "This is criminal." The words didn't bring me joy, not exactly, just clarity. He continued, "They'll contact you soon for a statement. You're clean, legally and financially. You covered yourself perfectly. But when this goes public, people will talk. Stay quiet. Let the truth speak for itself." "I've gotten good at quiet," I said. After the call, I sat for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window. I looked like someone older, not in years, but in lessons. By noon, the story had hit local business blogs. Evermark Logistics executive suspended amid fraud probe. His name wasn't mentioned yet, but it was only a matter of time. Around 3 p.m., my phone started lighting up unknown numbers, blocked IDs, a few texts that didn't need to be read to know they came from him. I muted it all. At 4, Linda knocked on the door again, holding her umbrella like a shield. "They towed his truck," she said gently. "Police came earlier." I nodded. "Good." She hesitated. "You holding up, honey?" "I think so." She gave me that small, knowing smile. You're stronger than you look." When she left, I went back inside and started cleaning, not because the house was messy, but because my mind finally had space for order. I boxed up the last few things that still reminded me of him, the baseball trophies, the cufflinks, the whiskey glasses. I didn't throw them away. I just moved them into the garage. Out of sight, out of memory. That evening, I opened my laptop to an email from a journalist at the Ledger Review. "Mrs. Hale, we're running a piece on the Evermark case. We understand you may have information about Mr. Hale's activities. Would you be open to an interview?" I stared at the message for a full minute before closing it. I didn't need to explain myself to strangers. The truth didn't need a press release. By the weekend, the inevitable happened. His name hit the headlines. Ryan Hale, Senior VP at Evermark Logistics, fired amid financial misconduct investigation. There it was, in black and white, the end of the man who once thought he owned everything. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt still. Like watching the final domino fall in a line I'd already stepped away from. Later that night, Daniel called again. "They arrested him again this afternoon. Federal charges this time. Fraud and forgery." "Forgery?" I asked, even though I already knew. "The signatures on those loan documents. The ones he faked under your name. That's what sealed it." I didn't say anything for a while. Then, quietly, "So it's really over." "It's over," Daniel confirmed. After we hung up, I went outside. The air was cold and clean, and for once, the sky above Portland wasn't gray. I stood barefoot on the porch, listening to the wind move through the trees. My neighbor's dog barked in the distance. A car passed down the street, and I realized how much life had been happening around me all along. I'd just been too busy surviving to notice. Inside, I poured a drink, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the letter from Evermark's legal department. The last line caught my eye. "We thank you for your cooperation and integrity during this process." Integrity. It wasn't a word people used much these days, but it meant something to me now. It meant I'd done everything by the book, without screaming, without revenge by chaos. I'd chosen revenge by truth, the quiet kind that lasts. The next morning, I visited the hardware store, bought new glass for the broken window, repainted the front door the exact shade of deep green I'd always wanted. A small, symbolic renovation washing away the evidence of everything he'd tried to break. When the mail came, there was another letter, this one from the district court. Confirmation of my finalized restraining order and restitution rights. He was legally barred from contacting me for the next 5 years and liable for damages to the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement. That night, I finally slept through the whole night without waking up to phantom footsteps or the hum of his truck outside. The next morning, I went for a walk by the river. The fog was low, the kind that blurs the line between water and sky. I saw couples holding hands, joggers with coffee cups, people just living. And I smiled because I finally felt like one of them again. When I got home, I opened my laptop and typed the first email I'd written without anger in months, a short note to Daniel. "Thank you. For everything. I'm free." He replied within minutes. "Freedom suits you. Don't give it back." I stared at those words, let them sink in, and closed the laptop. In the quiet that followed, I looked around my house, my safe, imperfect, beautiful house, and whispered, almost to myself, "You tried to destroy this, Ryan. But all you did was show me how strong it really was." The house didn't need to be perfect anymore. It just needed to be mine. The courthouse in downtown Portland was smaller than I expected, nothing grand or cinematic, just beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the smell of burnt coffee from a vending machine in the hallway. Daniel met me at the entrance, holding a slim folder. "You ready?" he asked. I adjusted the sleeve of my blazer and said, "I've been ready for years." "Oh." The divorce hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., sharp. Ryan was already there when we walked in, sitting beside his lawyer, looking thinner, older, and smaller in ways that had nothing to do with weight. His confidence had evaporated, replaced with a twitchy sort of restlessness. He didn't look at me, not once. The judge, a calm woman with gray hair tied back in a low bun, flipped through the documents. "This case appears straightforward. Petition for dissolution, Claims of marital misconduct, property division under community law. Mrs. Hale, your attorneys submitted full evidence of financial fraud, physical threats, and violation of a protective order. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. She nodded. And Mr. Hale, your side? Ryan's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client admits to certain poor decisions. However, he disputes the characterization of intent. These were emotional mistakes, not criminal in nature. We're requesting consideration for reconciliation of property rights. Denied, the judge said before he could finish. The evidence is overwhelming. Ryan's head dropped slightly. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand. The room felt colder from that side, sterile and deliberate. Daniel handed me a copy of the bank statements. Can you confirm this account belongs to you? Yes, I said clearly. And that these withdrawals were made without your consent? Yes. Are. And these charges? He handed me another page: hotel stays, luxury dinners, airline tickets. I glanced at the list and said softly, they weren't mine. Ryan shifted in his chair, his hand covering his mouth like he wanted to disappear behind it. Then Daniel asked the question that turned the air to glass. Mrs. Hale, do you recall what your husband said to you the night you refused to sell your house? I hesitated only a second before answering. He said, if you don't sell it, I'll make sure you regret it. The judge's pen stopped moving. Daniel nodded. And did he follow through on that threat? Yes. He smashed property in the home with a baseball bat. He forged my signature on credit documents. He stalked me after separation. He tried to intimidate me into giving up the house I legally owned. I turned my gaze toward Ryan for the first time. And when that didn't work, he broke into it. Indeed? Ryan's lawyer started to object, but the judge waved him off. She's responding to a direct question. Overruled. For the first time, Ryan met my eyes. His expression wasn't anger this time, it was humiliation. Daniel closed his folder. No further questions. When Ryan took the stand, his lawyer tried to paint him as a man under stress, a good husband who lost his way. He spoke about investment pressure and marital miscommunication, but the truth was too heavy to hide. Every lie came with paperwork. Every excuse had a timestamp. When the questioning was over, the judge sighed, removed her glasses, and looked directly at him. Mr. Hale, marriages fail for many reasons. But what I see here isn't failure, it's deliberate harm. You forged, you threatened, you broke the law. You treated your wife's safety as negotiable, and her property as collateral. Ryan said nothing. His lawyer tried to cut in again, but she raised her hand. Don't. You're not helping him. Oh. Then she turned to me. Mrs. Hale, do you wish to make a final statement before I issue the decree? I stood, steady as stone. I don't need to explain what he did, I said. You can see that in the documents. What I want the record to show is simple. He called it an investment. I called it control. But today, I'm making a different kind of investment in peace. I'm asking this court to end this legally, completely, and permanently. Oh. The courtroom went so silent I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. The judge nodded once, then spoke clearly for the record. The marriage of Nora and Ryan Hale is hereby dissolved. Full property rights are granted to Mrs. Hale, along with restitution for damages. Mr. 25, along with restitution for damages. Hale, you are prohibited from any form of contact. Court is adjourned. The gavel hit once. Sharp. Final. I didn't look back when I walked out, but I could feel his eyes burning into my spine. Maybe for the first time, he realized there was no version of this story where he got the last word. Outside, the morning air was crisp and bright. I stood on the courthouse steps, closed my eyes, and let the sunlight touch my face. Daniel joined me a moment later, holding a copy of the final order. It's done, he said. Done, I repeated. The word felt strange on my tongue, like something I'd been waiting to say my entire life. He smiled faintly. You handled that beautifully. End quote. I let out a short laugh. Funny. I used to think revenge needed to look dramatic. Turns out, it just needed to be legal. Quiet revenge, he said. The best kind. We stood there for a while, not talking, just watching the city move around us. People rushing to lunch, buses hissing at stops, a street musician playing guitar down the block. Life went on like it always does after storms end. When Daniel left, I sat on the courthouse bench for a few minutes longer, staring at the paper in my hand. The words "Final Decree of Dissolution" shimmered under the sunday. It wasn't just ink, it was proof. Proof that the woman who once begged for peace had learned to build it herself. When I got home, the house felt different, not haunted, not heavy. Just mine. I set the court papers on the table beside the coffee mug I'd been using that morning. The one with a tiny chip on the rim, the same cup I'd been holding the night. Ryan said, "You'll regret this." He was right, in a way. I did regret wasting so many years trying to fix a man who only knew how to destroy. But the silence that filled the house now wasn't regret. It was relief. It was freedom, steady, legal, and entirely earned. The first morning after the divorce decree felt unreal. No papers to sign, no calls from lawyers, no messages from anyone demanding explanations. Just the sound of rain against the windows, and the smell of coffee drifting through my kitchen. I didn't realize how much space chaos took up until it was gone. The house was quiet, but not hollow. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like it belonged to me again. I walked from room to room barefoot, noticing small things I hadn't seen in months: the light falling through the curtains, the faint scratches on the dining table, the way the porch still smelled like cedar after the rain. It didn't look like the house of a woman who'd just survived a storm. It looked like the house of a woman who was finally free. I spent the first week cleaning and repairing everything he'd broken. The baseball bat dents near the pantry were patched up, the shattered glass replaced, the walls repainted in soft, warm tones instead of the dull gray he liked. One afternoon, while repainting the living room, I found a note he'd left behind in the drawer of his old desk. Just 3 words in his handwriting: "You'll regret this." I stared at it for a long moment, then tossed it into the trash can with the rest of the useless debris. That night, I opened a new notebook and wrote 3 different words on the first page. I made it. End of tree. A few weeks later, Daniel stopped by with coffee and a folder. "You've officially received restitution from the court," he said, setting the papers on the table. "Ryan's assets have been liquidated. You're free financially, too." "Free," I repeated. That word never lost its weight. Daniel smiled. "So what's next for Nora Hale?" I thought for a second, then laughed. "I don't know. But for the first time, that's a good thing." He nodded. "You don't need to rush. Sometimes standing still is the most powerful thing you can do." After he left, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: walk into town with no purpose. The bookstore owner, Marcy, recognized me immediately. "You're back," she said warmly. "Haven't seen you in ages." "Life got complicated," I said. "Doesn't it always?" She chuckled, handing me a cup of tea. "You look lighter, though. Happier." "I think I am," I said, surprised to realize it was true. That small act, buying a book, talking to someone without pretending, felt like a beginning. By the end of the month, I started something new, a small financial consulting business from home. Not big, not loud, just mine. I called it Hale Reclaim Finance, half as a joke, half as a statement, helping other women navigate money after divorce or betrayal. The first client came through a friend of a friend, a nurse, going through her own separation. She sat at my kitchen table, nervous and ashamed about her finances. I walked her through every form, every account, every legal safeguard. By the time she left, she said, "I don't feel scared anymore." That night, I realized that was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not revenge, not victory, but usefulness. The business grew slowly. Word spread through community boards and local Facebook groups. Within months, I had regular clients, all women rebuilding after something that tried to break them. Every story was different, but they all shared one line: a man who said, "Trust me," before taking everything. Helping them wasn't charity. It was closure. One morning, while updating invoices, I got an unexpected email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." For a second, my stomach tightened, but curiosity made me open it. It was from Sophie Grant. "You don't know me personally, but I owe you an apology. I didn't know how much of what Ryan told me was a lie. I didn't know about the loans or the threats. When everything came out, I lost my job and my reputation. I deserved that. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I read it twice, then closed it. I didn't reply. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. That evening, I sat on the porch with Linda. She handed me a glass of iced tea and said, "You've turned this place around. It feels different." "It is different," I said. "It's peaceful." She smiled. "You earned it." I watched the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and gold. The same view I used to ignore because I was too busy fixing someone else's disasters. Now, I just sat there and let the world move without me needing to control it. Later that night, I picked up my old notebook again. Under "I made it," I wrote, "I'm building something better." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and started baking something I hadn't done since before the marriage fell apart. It wasn't for anyone else this time, just me. While the bread was cooling, I opened my laptop and drafted an announcement for my business website. For women rebuilding from financial and emotional betrayal, because peace is the best return on investment. I hit publish and smiled. It wasn't a dramatic ending. No final confrontation, no grand reveal. Just a woman sitting in a quiet house that she owned, finally living life without waiting for the other shoe to drop. The walls were still imperfect. The roof still creaked when it rained. But the foundation, the part that mattered, was solid again. And so was I. Spring came early that year. The air in Portland had that clean, damp scent that meant everything was trying to start again. I woke up one morning to the sound of birds outside the window, soft, insistent, alive. The kind of sound that used to annoy me when my life was chaos. Now it felt like proof that the world was still good. The sun came through the window, falling across the framed certificate from the state, the official registration for Hale Reclaim Finance. The gold lettering caught the light just right. I smiled at it every morning, like a silent reminder of what it cost me to earn that name. That day, I had a meeting with one of my newest clients, a woman named Teresa. She was in her early 40s, working 2 jobs after leaving a husband who had emptied their joint account. She showed up nervous, twisting her wedding ring around her finger even though the divorce had been finalized months ago. We sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out, coffee steaming between us. She said quietly, "I don't even know where to start." I handed her a pen. "Start right here, with your name. Everything else builds from there." Halfway through our meeting, she looked up and said, "You talk like someone who's been through this." I smiled. You could say that. By the time she left, she wasn't crying anymore. That alone felt like progress for both of us. When the door closed, I stood for a moment, listening to the echo of quiet. Not the heavy, fearful kind I used to live in, but a peaceful one. The kind that feels earned. Later that afternoon, I went out to the backyard to water the small garden. I'd started tomatoes, basil, and wildflowers along the fence. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The hose hissed softly as I worked, and for some reason, I found myself thinking about the first night Ryan brought that baseball bat into the house. It didn't make me angry anymore. Just distant. Like a story that happened to someone else. Inside, the house was filled with small traces of my new life. A framed photo of me and Linda from the neighborhood fundraiser. A stack of thank you notes from clients. Even a new rug in the living room, bright blue, not the muted gray he once insisted on. Every inch of it whispered the same thing. Peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just quietly replaces everything broken. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The city lights flickered through the trees. Somewhere down the block, kids were playing basketball, their laughter echoing through the street. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Daniel. Got the final update from the court. Ryan's plea deal went through. Probation, community service, full restitution. It's over. Me. Good. Daniel. You sound calm. Me. I am. He finally has to live with himself. That's punishment enough. There was a pause before he replied. You did everything right, Nora. You played the long game and you won. End of falls. I smiled at the message. But in truth, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving, then choosing what came after survival. I put the phone away and just sat there, breathing in the cool night air. For once, there was nothing left to fix. A week later, I got a letter from the local women's business network. They wanted to feature my company in their magazine. The title made me laugh. The Woman Who Turned Betrayal into Empowerment. When the interviewer came by, she asked, "If you could tell other women one thing about rebuilding after betrayal, what would it be?" I thought for a moment and said, "That revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just signing your own paycheck, owning your own home, sleeping through the night without fear." She smiled, nodded, and wrote it down. That weekend, I treated myself to something I'd been putting off for months, a new couch. I picked it out myself. No compromises, no second opinions. When it arrived, I spent half an hour arranging the cushions, just right before sitting down with a cup of coffee. The sun dipped low outside, turning the sky golden. I looked around and realized the house finally matched the version of life I'd imagined years ago, the one he'd promised but never built. Only this time, I didn't need anyone's promise. I got up, went to the wall, and took down the baseball bat that had been hanging there since the night he was arrested. I'd kept it as a reminder, not of fear, but of transformation. I carried it out to the backyard, dug a small hole near the garden, and buried it beneath the soil. The sound of dirt hitting metal was oddly satisfying. When I stood back up, I whispered, "Rest there. You've done enough damage." "Oh?" As the last bit of sunlight faded, I brushed the dirt from my hands and looked around. The yard, the house, the air, it all felt different now. Not lighter, but grounded. Strong, whole. That night, as I got ready for bed, I passed by the mirror and caught my reflection, calm eyes. No tension in my jaw, no shadow of who I'd been before. I thought about everything he'd taken and everything I'd reclaimed, and for the first time, the two columns didn't balance. I'd gained more. Before turning out the light, I opened my notebook one last time. Under the words, "I made it," and "I'm building something better," I added one final line. He called it an investment. He was right. I invested in myself, and it finally paid off. I closed the notebook, set it on the nightstand, and slipped under the covers. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, steady and sure. It wasn't silence anymore. It was peace, the kind that doesn't ask permission and doesn't explain itself, the kind that stays. If you like real-life cheating stories, revenge stories, and tales of husband betrayal where strength speaks quietly, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. Every story here reminds someone that silence isn't weakness, it's power reclaimed.